Hello, welcome to session 2, Basic Law 1. We are going to be talking about landlord-tenant rights. Some of you are about to move into an apartment. Maybe you're living in an apartment right now, or maybe you have relatives living in apartments that you can share the information I'm going to be teaching you with today. This is going to be practical information that you can use when you are about to rent your apartment building. Okay? I have been practicing as a trial and litigation paralegal in my community for over 20 years, assisting people in housing court, assisting people with landlord-tenant issues, assisting people in conciliation court. So we are going to learn your rights when it comes to renting an apartment building. This is information you're going to want to save. You will be able to use and apply. Now, to pass this session, it's pretty easy. All you have to do is every time I go to the board and write, you have to write down whatever I'm writing on the board with your own paper and pencil and turn that into me after this session. That's all you have to do. So every time I go to the board and write, you have to write whatever I'm writing on your own paper, having your own pen or pencil. So if you need to stop the video to go and grab paper and pencil, do it now. You stop the video. And now you're back. Okay, let's get started. Remember, when I write, you write. So what we're going to talk about is landlord-tenant rights. We're going to talk about entering into an agreement, We're going to talk about what happens to you during your tenancy. That means you being a tenant. We're also going to talk about how you properly end your residency, your tenancy, how to end tenancy, and other important laws that you need to know when it comes to renting an apartment building. I want you on your own to look up Minnesota statutes, MINN.STATS, Minnesota statutes. Just go to your Google Minnesota statutes 504. 504B, 504B, point 181. These statutes deal with your rights as a tenant. These statutes would tell you what your landlord can do and what your landlord cannot do to you when you're renting property. So if you Google this yourself, you will understand when you move into your apartment, you will already be empowered because you're going to know some of these laws that I'm about to teach you today. On your papers, you should have enter into an agreement during tenancy, ending your tenancy, and Minnesota statutes 504B, point 181. Those are going to be all your housing statutes. You're going to need to know those laws. They're empowering laws to know these laws before you move into your apartment. Okay? Now, when I erase, that gives you an opportunity to catch up on your notes. So as I erase, you do what? You're catching up on your notes. Okay, let's talk about the agreement. The agreement between you and your landlord. The agreement. You move into your apartment, you sit down with your landlord, and you have this agreement about what your lease will say, what you can do, what you cannot do, when rent is due, all that kind of stuff is called your agreement. When you enter into any agreement, there are 3 elements you need: offer, consideration, and acceptance. Three elements: offer, consideration, and acceptance. The offer is what you and the landlord decide you want. The landlord says the rent is $900 a month. And if you agree to pay $900 a month, I'm going to rent you the unit. That's his offer. The consideration is when you might say, okay, who pays the utility bills? Who pays taking out the trash? And you all kind of talk about who has all those other kind of responsibilities. Once the offer is made, you talk about consideration, who pays the bills, who pays the light bills, who pays utilities, who cuts the grass, anything you can bring up. Then once you have these two figured out, offer, consideration, you accept it. Once you accept this, you enter into what is called a legally binding contract. Now, this is where it gets sticky, because once you go through your offer, consideration, you accepted everything. Now you enter into this legally binding contract that says you have to pay rent. And if you move out before you pay your rent, you're going to owe that rent, and a landlord can take you to court and sue you for that rent that you don't pay if you move out too early. So this is where it gets sticky. When you legally enter into that agreement. When I erase, you do what? Catch up on your notes. Let me erase a little slower. Should I erase slower? Shh, slower? No, okay, just play. All right. Now, you sat down with the landlord, you entered into your agreement. Now you're ready to move into your apartment. One thing you should do before you move into your apartment is tell your landlord, I want to inspect my unit before I move in. And if the landlord denies you the opportunity to inspect before you move in, I turn around and walk away from that agreement because there's something he or she does not want you to see. So remember, inspecting your unit. When you inspect your unit, INSPECT, inspect. Now remember, before you move into your unit, you want to go in and do your own inspection, okay? When you inspect your unit, you want to look for things like utilities, okay? Maybe there's a light socket and the cover's off the light socket, okay? A light switch, the cover's off the light switch. Maybe you look in their refrigerator, something's wrong with their refrigerator. You look up, something's wrong with the ceiling. You look at the screen, and maybe there's a hole in the screen and the screen is out. You want to look for something that's wrong before you move in that unit so that you can note that, so that when you move out, the landlord does not try to charge you for damages that were there before you even moved in, okay? So you want to look for utilities. You want to look at your appliances. Okay, appliances. Look at the refrigerator. Look at the oven. Look at the stove. The dishwasher, if you have one. Look at your appliances. Make sure they're clean. Turn them on. Turn them off. Make sure they're working. Okay. Look at your electric systems. Your electric systems. Turn on your light switches. Make sure the lights are working in every room. Your electric systems, okay? You want to look at your lights. Are the cover over the lights? Are the lights working? Any bulbs that are not working? You want to inspect your unit because you're about to pay this man, this woman some money, okay? So you want the unit up to code. You want the unit enjoyable before you move in, not after you move in, okay? When I go to the board and erase, you catch up on your notes. Oh, you also want to look at your plumbing, okay? Turn your water on and off in the bathrooms, showers on and off. Look at the plumbing. Turn your water on and off. Make sure everything runs. Ooh, a good trick is to turn everything on at the same time. Turn your shower on, turn the kitchen sink on, turn water on all over the place, and see if the water is coming out of the faucet with the proper pressure. I gave you that free. Okay? Now, you want to check on your landlord, okay? Your landlord has done some checking on you, which we're going to talk about later. So you want to check on your landlord. Ask your landlord if she or he has a license to rent you that unit, okay? LCENSENSE, license to rent, okay? Ask your landlord, do you have a license to rent me this unit? They're going to be doing a check on you. So you have a right to do some checks on your landlord, okay? Do you have a license to rent me this unit? When I go to the board and erase, that gives you a chance to catch up on your notes. Now, what is required in the background check? You're about to move in this apartment. Your landlord is going to do a background check on you. So let's talk about what's required in the background check. Required in background check. Okay, required a background check. The law mandates background checks on every manager. Now listen, I want you all to get this because they're doing a background check on you. So I'm gonna get you all to the point where you're gonna start doing a little checking on your landlord before you move in. He's checking you out. Okay. So now you're gonna check your landlord out a little bit. Okay. The law mandates background checks on every manager. Anyone that will be entering your unit, the law mandates a background check. For example, you don't want someone coming in your unit doing inspections, coming in your apartment, looking around your apartment. If the person's been arrested for criminal sexual conduct, stalking, okay? You don't want your manager having keys to your apartment or anyone having keys to your apartment with you and your children there that may have some shady stuff in their background coming into your unit. Do you? Not me. Okay? So the law requires background checks on anyone that has access to your apartment. Okay? Background checks on anyone, underlying anyone, background checks on anyone that is going to have access to your apartment. Background checks. So, what do you want to know? And you can ask your landlord this. Ask your landlord before you move in. Who will be entering my unit? Who has access to my unit? I want to know everyone that has access to my unit. You moving in, maybe you're single, maybe you have a family, maybe you have children. Don't you want to know who has access to your unit? Who will be coming in your unit making repairs? Who will be coming in your unit for any reason at all? You want to know something about somebody coming in your apartment, right? You have a right to know this by law. So you ask the landlord, who's coming in your unit? Okay? You want to know something about people that have access to your unit. You want to know if this person has any murder convictions, if this person has any rape convictions, if this person has any kidnapping convictions, criminal sexual conduct, CSC. You want to know. Now, y'all get this, okay? This is important because you're going to have people coming in your apartment doing repairs, okay? Checking the unit out every now and then, and we get into when they can and cannot come into your unit. But this is important stuff. Do not be afraid to ask your landlord this kind of information. Okay, you want to know who's coming in your unit. Okay, the law requires anyone that comes into your unit, the law requires that person has a background check. And you want to know if this person coming in your unit has murder conviction, just got out of prison for something, kidnapping charges, convicted of criminal sexual conduct, rape, stalking. You want to know who's coming in your building. But now here's a tricky thing, okay? Here's a tricky thing. These people may be able to come into your unit if they have been convicted of some of these things we talked about and 10 years has passed since their conviction. Did you know that? A person who has been guilty of stalking, criminal sexual conduct, murder, rape, after 10 years, some of these people still may be able to have access to your unit. Don't you want to know that? I do. That's important stuff when you have babies, you have children. Come on, y'all. You have a right to know that. Ask your landlord. Don't be afraid to ask those questions. When I erase, you do what? Catch up on your notes. Because remember, I'm going to want to see your notes. Okay, let's keep moving. I'm going to move fast here, okay? And I want you all to keep up, and I know you will. All right? Let's talk about screening and all these fees that you're charged when you go to rent an apartment, all these screening fees, okay? Screening and pre-lease fees. Write down screening and pre-lease fees. I'm left-handed. So y'all notice when I'm writing, sometimes I'll erase when I'm writing. If I'm going this way, I'm trying not to do that. Okay, screening and pre-lease fees. You know how you pay some of these screening fees? You go in, they tell you you have to pay this fee for a background check and all that kind of stuff. That's what we're going to talk about right now, okay? When you pay your screening fee, landlords won't tell you this, but they must return your screening fee if these issues arise for reasons not listed in the disclosed criteria. They also must return your fee, screening fee, if you find out that a prior applicant is offered and enters into a rental agreement. Okay? Now let's talk about that, what that means, okay? So you apply, they tell you, I want $50, for example, for a screening fee. So they do a little background check on you. But then all of a sudden, you find out that another applicant actually moved in that apartment that you were looking at. If you find that out, they have to return your screening fee. So if they tell you this apartment is no longer available, your question should be something like, so has the apartment been rented? And they'll go, yes. You might go, Well, when was it rented? And if they tell you that the apartment was rented prior to you moving in or prior to your screening background check, they have to give you that money back. If they don't, I want to know. Okay, let's keep moving. When I erase, gives you a chance to catch up on what? You got it, your notes. Okay, now there's a reason why I want you all writing this stuff down, because this is what you're going to save. You're going to have your own little packet. You're going to save all this information. So by the time you move into your apartment or a relative calls you and says they're having a problem, you'll be able to go back to your notes and go over some of this stuff. Okay, now if the landlord accepts your screening fee, he or she must. So they tell you $60, $50, $100 for a screening fee. Once they accept that money, they take that money out of your hand. If the landlord, LL, two L's for landlord, accepts your screening fee, okay, can y'all read my writing? Screening fee. The landlord accepts your screening fee. He or she must do the following. One, provide the name, address, and phone number of the screening service. Someone's going to do a check on you. You're entitled to know who is doing that check on you when you give that landlord your money. Okay? You're entitled to know the name, address, phone number of that screening service. Ask for it. You're entitled to know the name, address, and phone number of that screening service. Okay? Let me write that better. Screening, SCREENING, service, VICE. Okay? You're also entitled to know the criteria that you will be judged on. So, what are they looking for? What's the criteria? You're renting your apartment. You're entitled to ask the landlord, what are they looking for when you do this check on me? Two, ask what are they, the screening service, looking for? Now, when you ask your landlord these kinds of questions, your landlord might think, well, this person's got some schooling. This person knows the law. It may frighten some landlords because they may get the idea that you're the kind of person that's going to stand up for your rights. But you're entitled to this. If I move in an apartment, I'm going to ask these questions, y'all. I'm going to ask the name, address, and let me tell you why. Because when I was years old, and I'm years old now, I remember moving into an apartment and the screening service did a background check on me and they got information. I don't know where they got it from. It was wrong. Okay. And I remember going asking the landlord for this information. The landlord refused to give it to me. I served him with a legal notice. I got that stuff quick. I found out about the screening service. And when I found out about the screening service, I discovered by looking up research that the screening service had several lawsuits against them filed in court. You don't think I used that to my advantage? I did. Anyway, name, address, screening service, and what they're looking for. Now, here's what some of us don't know. And I want you to remember this. Remember, write it down. Remember, if you are rejected for any reason, so the landlord hires a screening service, you paid your fee, and now they come back with information and you're rejected. For any reason, 14 days. I want you to write down 14 days. Reason for your rejection must be given within 14 days. So, if you are rejected, you send a written notice to the landlord, to the manager, that you want within 14 days the reason why you were rejected. Some of us don't do that. The landlord says, oh, you've been rejected. We don't want to rent to you. Maybe the landlord just doesn't like you for whatever the reason. Maybe the landlord figures this is the kind of person that's going to stand up for his or herself. So they come back and tell you that the screening service rejected you, and it may be the landlord's own personal bias. So that's why if you're rejected, you tell that landlord that you want the reason for being rejected, and that landlord has 14 days to give you those reasons. If you think those reasons are wrong, inappropriate, discriminatory, there's legal recourse for you that we're going to talk about. You don't let people just take advantage of you. Not me, I don't. You shouldn't either. Okay? When I erase, you do what? You write and catch up on your notes. Because remember, to pass this session, I'm going to be looking at your notes, making sure you have everything that I'm writing on the board. Okay? Let's talk a little bit about security deposit. I'm going to bounce around and give you guys just different information, different concepts, and just give you some real quick information so that you have it in your folder that you're going to keep, which is why I want to see your notes. Okay? Let's talk about security deposits. Write down security deposit. And if you have to stop the video and pause it, take a break, stop, pause it, I guarantee you, I'll be here when you return. Okay, security deposit. Draw a line over here and a little square, okay? And that square, I want you to write LL for landlord, LL, landlord may require a security deposit. Landlord may require your security deposit. The security deposit can, that's C-A-N. Now, this is where people get in trouble. And this is where people call me and we're going to housing court and they're in trouble because I want you to understand something about your security deposit, okay? Your security deposit can be used for, write it down, damage to property. It can be used for unpaid rent. It can be used to pay your water that you haven't paid or other utilities. Utilities. Okay, I spelled it right. All right. Now, this is where people get in trouble because you pay your security deposit and then you think that if you damage property, you think that if your rent is unpaid, you move out, you didn't pay your rent. You think if you didn't pay the water, other utilities, you think the landlord is supposed to give you your security deposit back. Wrong. Security deposit. Get this. It can, C-A-N, be used to cover damages when you move out. It can be used to cover some of your unpaid rent. It can be used to cover water or other utility bills. This is what I call the biggest street myth that's out there today. The biggest street myth. People think you got to give me my security deposit back. You know how many calls I get? The landlord didn't give me my security deposit back, Mr. Lucky. I was told you could help me. I'm like, well, why is he keeping it? Well, I didn't pay rent. I didn't pay utilities, or damaged the window, and now he's going to use my security deposit. I'm like, well, I can't work miracles. Your security deposit can be used for these kinds of things. Okay? When I erase, you do what? Catch up on your notes. Am I racing too fast? Y'all can always pause the video now. Come on. Okay? Okay. Anyway. Now, let's move on. This is getting good, y'all, because I know at least this part about what your security deposit can be used for. Some of y'all are probably thinking, man, I didn't know he can use it for that. Okay, so this is going to get better. Information y'all going to need. All right, guarantee it. Let's kill the myth. And you don't have to write this down. Okay. We just killed the myth about security deposits. Okay. You don't have to write this down, what I'm saying. But there was the myth out there about what security deposits can and cannot be used for. We just killed that myth about what you thought your security deposit could not be used for. Okay. All right. I want to bring up some quick points, y'all. Some points. And I don't mean points, extra points for a test or anything. I'm going to bring up some points. Okay. Upon your request, I want you to write down upon request. Oops, did I spell request wrong? Hold on. Upon request. I gotta tell you, I spelled the word wrong, so I just corrected it. I mean, I'd given up trying to be perfect a long time ago. It doesn't work for me. It just doesn't work for me. Does it work for you, trying to be perfect all the time? I've given up, y'all. It doesn't work for me. Okay, it was a joke. Anyway. Okay, upon request, the screening service, I want you to write upon request, then I want you to write screening service. So let's go back to the screening service. This company, let's call it Little Rock Screening Service. I just made that up. Okay, so let's say Little Rock Screening Service. Okay, that's the company. I made that name up. Y'all want to make up another name for a screening service, go ahead. But my name is Little Rock Screening Service. Now, you want to make up your own name for a screening service, go ahead and write down your own name, okay? So when I see your paper, I'm going to see Little Rock Screening Service, but I might see your own name in there, something you made up for your own screening service, okay? So the screening service, some things you should know. The screening service did a background check on you, okay? And now here are some things you should know about the screening service. You can request from that screening service, okay? Request, write down. You can request, R-E-Q-U-E-S-T. You can request from the screening service. Number one, all information about you. You know how many times people go and they rent apartments and they're denied and they just walk away from it? No, moving forward, the screening service, You have the right to get this information from the screening service. Number one, all information about you. I don't want you to put in big capital letters, all information about you. You have the right to know the sources of that information. So if someone said something negative about you to the screening service, you have a right to know who said something about you. So, number two, you have the right to know their sources for information. You also have the right for a copy of all people receiving a copy of all people receiving a copy of that report about you. So when that screening service does a report, they're sending that copy to people. You want to know who they're sending a copy of that report that they just made on you. Who gets a copy of that? Okay, so you want to request a copy, COPY, copy of all people getting that report about you. Copy of all people get a report. 4, you are entitled to a statement of your rights from that reporting agency. So this agency did a report on you, okay? You want to know all the information that they have in their file about you. You want to know the sources of that information, where they got that information. You want a copy of everyone that's going to get a copy of that report, that information that they accumulated on you. You also have the right for a statement of your rights regarding their report. What that means, you ask them, you've done a big report of me. What are my rights now that you did this report? They got to tell you what your rights are. So you request your rights. Now, this is some powerful stuff for y'all to know, okay? Because too many of us, we rent apartments and then we get denied and we just walk away. The landlord keeps our money. We just walk away like ain't nothing happening. No more. The landlord does a report on you. You get rejected for whatever reason. You have a right to call Little Rock Screening Service. The landlord must tell you who the screening service is. Then you call Little Rock Screening Service and you say, I want all the information in your file about me. I want all the sources that gave you information on me, the police department, credit bureau, whoever, okay? You want a copy of everyone that's getting that report about you. You also want that screening company, Little Rock, to tell you what your rights are now that you've been denied. This is powerful stuff, y'all. For renting. Too many people in our community, we don't have this information. And too many of these slumlords that come in our community and rent apartments, and maybe they live out in Robbinsdale, they live up in Stillwater, and then they come in our community and they want to take advantage of some of us in our community because we don't know this information. Not anymore, because you do. When I erase, you do what? Catch up on your notes. I just erased Little Rock. Okay. Now, you may be asking, is this going to cost me anything, Mr. Lucky? Requesting all this information? Answer, copy, write this down, of tenants report without charge. So all the information I ask you to request, copy. I'm trying to get back in the video. Okay. Sorry, I'm just having a little fun. Copy of tenant's report without charge if in the past 60 days, so that means within 60 days that you have been denied, okay? If in the past 60 days, if it was used to, number one, get this, deny a rental unit, two, to increase your rent or deposit. Okay, so in the past 60 days, within 60 days, no charge for the information that we just talked about. If it was used to deny rent, toll property, so we're denying you the opportunity to move into this unit. If the information is being used to increase your rent or security deposit, rent deposit. For example, they may do a background check and they may come back and go, well, you know, the security deposit was $300. Because of the background check, now it's $600. If that happens, you get that information we talked about free. Okay? Or if you receive public assistance. So you get public assistance, right? And you're denied a unit because of the screening service. You can request all that information that we talked about earlier. You can get that information free if you get public assistance. So if you call that screening service and they say, hey, you want all this information, it's going to cost you $40. You say, no, I received public assistance, it's free. You say, no, it was used to increase my rent. Security deposit is free. No, it was used to deny my privilege to rent an apartment. Free. Number 4, if you apply for a job. See, y'all, we don't know this stuff. You guys are out there going into renting an apartment, about to rent a unit. You don't know this stuff. Okay? Now you do. If you apply for a job and a screening service denied your rent, you've been denied rental unit for any of these reasons, you do not have to pay to get the information that we talked about earlier. Now we know this. This empowers us in our community. See, young people, when you know this information, it's empowering because too many times we walk away from something not knowing, or we act a fool, start being vitriolic toward the landlord, using expletives, police are called, then you get in trouble. Know this information because you can deal with these people in a totally different way by law that gives you the power. When I erase, you do what? Catch up on your notes. Now remember, in order to pass this session, landlord tenant, I'm going to look over your notes. And every time I write something on the board, I want to see it in your notes. Pretty simple to pass this one, y'all. We got it. Okay? All right. If you are denied, more, this is empowering. We're talking about screening, being denied. Your rights now, if you're denied being able to rent a unit. People could come up with all kind of reasons to deny you. Sometimes it might be discriminatory. You know, I don't know, 25, 30 years ago, we had a team of people and we would go in some places. First, it would be me. And I walk into a place and say, I want to rent a unit. I'm sorry, sir, we don't have any units available. Units available. Then we would send a white person in an hour later, and all of a sudden, they had apartments available. I mean, we had a fantastic team 25 something years ago in our community. We didn't play with people, y'all, when it came to protecting our community, our people, and our rights. That's what I'm teaching you to do now with this landlord tenant information. Okay. Hello. Sorry, the student just came in, popped their head in and said hi. So I said, hello. Anyway, okay. Now, if you are denied, your landlord must provide. So you apply for this apartment, you've been denied. Now your landlord, write down denied. If you are denied, landlord, LL, must provide. Write it down. If you are denied, your landlord must provide, number one, oral or written or electronic notice why you were denied. Too many times we rent an apartment, we're denied, and we just walk away and say, okay, well, if you have anything next year, will you call me? And a landlord may play that trick on you, deny you, and then go, well, if anything comes up in the next few months, we'll give you a call, to make it seem like they're trying to be friendly to you. Don't let them play that nonsense on you. If you are denied a rental unit, the landlord must provide you with oral, ORAL, written, or electronic reason why you were denied. They also must provide, and we went over this before, the name, address, phone number of the screening agency. And remember, for me, that was Little Rock Screening Agency. They must provide the name, address, and phone number of the screening agency and tell you of your right to obtain a free, write it down, free, Free, tell you of your right to obtain a free copy of the report from the screening service. That's the big one, it's free. I've had situations where people call me and they ask for this information and they go, the landlord told me that would cost me $30. Man, tell them bump that. Tell them you're not talking to no ignorant person out here. That landlord, no, you're talking to a very well educated, empowered person with honor and pride and dignity. And just because you refused me this unit, you will not take away my pride, you will not take away my dignity, you will not take away my honor. So I'm going to keep my dignity, I'm going to keep my honor, I'm going to keep my pride by making you give me this information if you deny me an apartment. You're going to give me the name, address, phone number of the screening agency. You're going to give me a free copy of the report from that screening service. So that landlord has that report in his hand, her hand. You want a copy of it. All right? See, you may sense a little anger in me right now because I get so many calls of people walking away. It may be like 3 or 4 months later where I'll talk with someone and they'll tell me I was denied and, Now I don't have a place to go and I'm still looking. I'm like, why were you denied? Well, I don't know. He just said I wasn't a good fit or some nonsense. I'm like, you go back within 60 days. I said, you go back, you get this information. Sometimes information the landlord never had anyway. It's created something to tell you something, hoping that you would walk away because maybe they don't like you for some other reason. When I erase, you do what? Catch up on your notes. Okay. See, this is some cool stuff, y'all. Okay, this is stuff I want you to have written down because this is something if you're going to need information you're going to need when you move into your first apartment, or maybe you have relatives living in apartments now. Okay, some more points I want to make. So I just want to make some other points. So write down points, points. Write it down. Okay. Some other things that you may want to know when you move into your apartment. I'm just going to do this so quickly because I want to move through this quickly. Let's give you some quick points right quick. Okay. You are entitled to a copy of the lease. Too many times people move in apartments, they don't get a copy of the lease. Don't let that happen to you. Get a copy of the lease. Also, check this out, especially if you have kids, okay? Apartment buildings, units built before 1978, the landlord must disclose all lead-based paint in the unit. Ask this question, ask the landlord, was this unit built before 1978? Write down 1978. And write down lead-based paint. If you have children, don't you want to know this information, y'all? Ask this to the landlord, okay? Landlord must disclose all lead-based paint in the unit. Ask the question, was this unit built before 1978? If the answer is yes, then your question is, tell me something about the lead-based paint. They have to tell you that information. Don't you want to know that with all the health issues related to lead-based paint poisoning for your little children that's going to be in that apartment building? You want to know that. Okay. Also, you want to make sure that you look over your lease, understand and question anything in your lease that you may or may not agree with. Okay? Look over your lease. And when you look over your lease, you want to look over, and I'm sorry, when you look over your lease, look in that lease and look for items like who is responsible to cover which utilities, who is responsible to cover which utilities, okay, who's responsible to cover which utilities, and here's what's important. Are you on a shared or single meter? Let me draw a picture. Here's an apartment, for example, okay? And you have 4 units on a floor, for example. And maybe there's 1 meter, okay? Electric meter. And this 1 meter is going to all of these apartments. So how do you know if this person's not using more electricity, more gas, or whatever, and maybe you're not using as much, but you're all on the same meter? So you're all paying something when you may not be using as much electricity as this person. So ask, are we all on the same meter? If so, what is your share to pay of whatever utilities you have to pay? If you're on a single meter, well, then you know everything you use is for your apartment. But ask the question. You move into these apartments, ask the question. What about the meters? Are we on a shared meter here? Okay. 5 units, 8 units, we're all sharing the same electricity meter. So how do you tell who's using more, who should be paying more? Ask that question. It could save you a lot of money every month, believe me. Okay. Make sure, let's write this down, rent. We're going to talk more about this later. Write down rent. Y'all pay your rent on time. Okay. Now, this is where people get in trouble. All right. You move out 5 months before the end of your tenancy. So you got 5 months left and you move out 5 months before those 5 months have expired. You owe rent for those 5 months. The landlord can take you to court and sue you for it, win in a lawsuit, get a judgment against you. So don't be getting out of your apartment 3 or 4 or 5 months early, because you know the landlord's going to find you because he's done a background check on you. So the landlord's going to find you. The landlord's going to get that money, y'all. Okay? So don't y'all be skipping out 2 or 3 or 4 months early. All right? Okay. When I erase, you do what? Catch up on your notes, because I'm going to be looking over your notes to make sure you get all of this information. And this is how you pass session 2, landlord tenant law. Okay? All right. Here we go. When I erase, you catch up on your notes. And if you want to pause the video, you can also pause the video, catch up too, y'all. It's all good, okay? It's not like I'm going to see you pause the video, all right? Okay. During your tenancy or during your rental, you got into the apartment, you're renting. During your tenancy, this is what I'm talking about now. Now you're living in your unit, everything's cool, everything's gravy, got mashed potatoes on the stove, fixing your little hot dogs and fixing your breakfast in the morning, your nice little unit. Okay? During the tenancy, the tenancy, that's Tenancy, tenancy. That's you, you're the tenant. During the tenancy, y'all pay your rent. Not your, pay your rent. Yo, no, okay. Pay your rent on time, y'all. Okay? And remember, roommates. Okay? Write roommates down, because this is what I want y'all to remember again. You have a roommate and both y'all going half on the rent, but your name is on the lease. And maybe the landlord approved you to have a roommate, but your name is on the lease. If your roommate vacates, moves, leaves, guess what? You are still responsible for the full rent. So write down, I pay full rent if your roommate decides to move to Los Angeles because he or she wants to be around, Beyonce or Kanye West or something. I don't know. So if your landlord finds out that your roommate has left, you can't go to your landlord and say, "Well, my roommate left, and so I don't have to pay the other rent." No, you are responsible for the full rent. Okay? If you don't pay your rent on time, get this down. If you don't pay your rent on time, the landlord can, CAN, start eviction proceedings. That's Proceedings. You don't pay your rent on time, the landlord can start eviction proceedings. Remember that, okay? Another thing landlords do, okay, is that sometimes they want to raise your rent. You've been living in your unit for a year, and I had I get several calls on this, okay? The landlord raised my rent. Can a landlord raise my rent? If you have a lease and the lease says your rent is this much from this day to this day, the landlord cannot raise your rent if it's in the lease and it's set in the lease. Once that lease expires, your landlord can raise your rent, okay? Now, when it comes to raising your rent, I want you to write this down, because sometimes I get calls and it'd be like maybe the 28th of any given month. And then a landlord says, I want you to know the first of next month, your rent is going to be raised. No, he can't do it like that, or she can't raise your rent that way, okay? If they're going to raise your rent, they must give, write this down, proper notice, okay? They're going to raise your rent, they must give proper notice. What is the proper notice? If the landlord says, I'm going to raise your rent in 5 days, that's not proper notice. Proper notice, get this, because this happens a lot, and some of us just pay it. And then you go through the struggle now trying to raise extra $50 or whatever within the next 5 days because your rent's going to go up. No, if the landlord is going to raise your rent, they must give you proper notice. If they don't give you this proper notice, you refuse to pay that rent and ask for proper notice for that increase of rent. That proper notice is 1 rental period, write this down, and 1 day. Okay, proper notice is 1 rental period and 1 day. So in other words, if they're going to raise your rent, let's say in March, they want to raise your rent in March, okay? They have to have given you notice in February that they're going to raise your rent in March plus 1 day, so March 2nd. So in other words, 1 month and 1 day before they can increase your rent. So when they give you that notice, you make sure that before you pay any more rent, that is at least 1 month and 1 day before that rent is increased. Otherwise, you have not been given proper notice to raise your rent. Next thing I want to talk about is landlords that enter your apartments. Hello. When landlords have a right and when they may not have a right to enter your apartment. Now get this, because a lot of times, wait. Let me back up real quick. I want the ladies to hear this, okay? Ladies, let's say you rent an apartment, okay? And your move-in date is the first of next month. Before you move in, your landlord is going to call you and say, hey, you want to go out? You want to go out for dinner? You want to go out? Can I hang out with you? This is all happening before you move in, and you just signed your lease. You just signed your agreement. Man, that's a sweet lawsuit, y'all. You're talking chain, money. Mm-hmm. Okay. You let someone know about that, sisters. All right. I digressed a little bit because I wanted my sisters to know that. All right. All right. Where'd I leave off at? Okay. Managers, landlords coming in your unit. Okay. Now remember when I talked earlier about landlord people coming in your unit, about you want background check information on anyone coming into your apartment building. I've already gone through that. I'm not going to go through it again, but I want you to remember that. Okay. Now let's talk about Landlords coming into your unit. Man, I've had calls from people to call and told me landlords come in their unit at 7 in the morning, sisters in the shower, and a landlord coming in their unit while they're in the shower. No, they're getting ready for work. Man, that kind of stuff starts happening, y'all. I want to know. That landlord gonna pay you some money. Anyway, okay. Landlords don't come in my apartment unless, I want you to write down, okay? Landlord, don't come in my apartment unless, number one, there's a reasonable business purpose for being in your unit. There has to be a reasonable business purpose for being in your unit. Some of those purposes could include things like showing your apartment to prospective tenants. So you're about to move out. Now the landlord has to show your apartment. So that's a reasonable business purpose to be able to come into your unit and show your unit to other people that may be moving in once they have given you proper notice that they're going to do that. They just can't come in anytime, knock on your door at 1 o'clock p.m., just walk on in, okay? Walk in at 5 o'clock. They just can't walk in and show your apartment any doggone time they want to. They have to give you notice that they're about to come in and show your apartment once you've given notice you're going to move, okay? They can come in for repairs, to make repairs. They can come in to check on some kind of disturbances, to check on disturbances. So don't y'all be partying all night, have the music up all loud. Okay, landlord's knocking on the door. You don't even hear the landlord knocking, your music all loud. If it's a disturbance, come in your unit. Okay, turn that music down if you're not answering that door, okay? You can also come in for lease violations, and other violations on the lease, okay? When I erase, you do what? Catch up on your notes. Y'all notice I got on my Minix shirt? Oh, over there. Minix. Okay. All right. There may be times, this is where it gets sticky, you all. There may be times when your landlord can come into your unit without giving you notice. And this is why I want to back up. This is why you want to know about the people coming in your apartment. When I talked earlier about background checks, who's coming in your unit? Who has access to your unit? Who's coming in your unit? You want background checks. You want to know about those people. Remember what I said earlier about that. So there are some things that are called exigent circumstances, or times when a landlord can come into your unit and not give you a notice, okay? And those times, I'm going to say these and write them down, to prevent injury to property, Something's going on. Maybe landlord gets a report that there's water coming down into the apartment below you, okay? Maybe the landlord comes by, he or she smells something burning. They can enter your apartment in those kinds of situations without giving you notice. They could also come into your apartment for building or security or law enforcement reasons. Security reasons, law enforcement reasons, depending on what some of those law enforcement reasons are, they may need a search warrant. Okay? They could also come in to do what is called a welfare check. Welfare check. Make sure you're okay. Maybe you haven't gone to work in a couple of days. No one's heard about you. Maybe a family member's called and said, hey, I haven't seen uh, Rip Van Winkle, I don't know, in a few days. Landlord may open the door and peek in and do what is called a welfare check. Make sure you're not laying there in your bed, you know, dead and passed out or something. Anyway, so the landlord can come in without notice for those kinds of things, okay? And a landlord may not be able to give you a notice to come in for other legal compliances. Okay, so just be aware of those few things. And landlords can come in without a notice. If a landlord comes into your apartment without reasonable notice and you find out about it, write this down, y'all. $100. That's cool right there, huh? The landlord comes into your apartment without reasonable notice and you find out about it. The law says that you are entitled to $100 for that kind of violation. Y'all like that, huh? $100. Okay. Well, I go to the board and erase, catch up on your notes. Okay. This is some cool stuff, huh? Y'all gonna have some cool stuff in your notes, man. By the time y'all go and rent your apartment building, y'all gonna know so much stuff. Y'all gonna be so empowered. You're gonna teach your relative some of this stuff. Yeah. Okay. Now, I want to talk about some things when we get into tenants calling the police. Okay. Sisters calling the police during domestics. And the landlord is going to turn around and evict you because you called the police because you needed assistance. Let's talk about that. Because some of these landlords that live out in Minnetonka, Robbinsdale, Stillwater, wherever they live, whenever they see something about us on TV, depending on who we are, all they see is negative stuff about us on the news. Shootings, robberies, whatever. So they see all the stuff about us on the news. And then these people who live over here who see all this stuff, now they're going to come into our neighborhoods and rent an apartment to you. And this is all they see is this negative stuff. Kind of makes you go, what they think about you before they even rent to you. Okay. So when we talk about police, some of them may see us as always being in trouble. You may be a victim of a crime. You may be a victim of domestic abuse. But depending on where they live and how they see us, they may not see you as a victim, even though you've been the victim of abuse. They may see you as somehow contributing to whatever you call the police for. Tenants may call the police. Write it down. Tenants, you may call the police, may call the police, including for domestics, domestic violence. You can call the police. Anytime you need the police or your apartment building for help, you can call the police. Yes, and you will and you shall call the police after knowing this information. The landlord, LL equals landlord, remember. The landlord cannot, write this down in big letters, cannot. The landlord cannot evict you for calling the police when you need help. And this is important because I get calls on these kinds of things from people who are threatened by domestic abuse, stalkers, people in their lives. And a landlord says, if you call the police one more time, I'm going to have to evict you. Landlord cannot tell you that, okay? The landlord cannot evict you for calling the police. The landlord cannot penalize you in any way for calling the police, or limit you in any way at all. Limit you. The landlord may say, well, you know what? You can no longer have guests after 8 p.m. You can no longer have guests after 1 p.m. You can if he limits you in any way at all, because you called the police because of a domestic situation for any reason that you needed help, you called the police, the landlord cannot evict you, cannot penalize you, cannot limit you in any way at all if you've been the victim of that crime. And too many times in our office, we get people who call us and say, hey, my boyfriend came over, I had to call the police. My boyfriend came over, committed a problem, I had to call the police. Now the landlord is going to evict me. Or the landlord is telling me I can't call the police anymore. Yes, you can. It's the law. And there's a penalty if the landlord tries to evict you, tries to penalize you, tells you stop calling the police. That landlord can be sued for up to $250. That's the law. Write it down, $250. So if you have a relative, you have a friend that's been calling the police because of a domestic situation, domestic abuse, calling the police because you need help, and a landlord is trying to evict you, the landlord is trying to penalize you, the landlord is trying to limit you in some way at all, the landlord is telling you to stop calling the police. If that happens to you and you've been the victim of domestic abuse, we want to know. Tenant right lawyers, paralegals want to know, because if that's happening, you can sue that landlord for $250 if that landlord starts eviction proceedings on you because you call the police for help. Remember that, because too many times as people of color, not knowing this law, when we call the police for help in our apartments, the first thing the landlord wants to do is start evicting us. The law protects you from that. Okay? When I erase, you do what? You write. Because I'm going to be checking your notes, okay? Every time I write on the boards, it should be in your notes. That's how you pass this session, okay? There's some cool stuff, y'all. Okay, let's go into repairs, because too many times we have repair problems. And too many times you guys, some of us go about handling our repairs the wrong way, and then we get in trouble. We go to housing court, and we're sitting there in a housing court with an eviction because you haven't paid your rent. You've done something and you did it the wrong way because you don't know how to deal with repair issues. So the landlord ends up turning everything around on you. And by the time you go to court, you're being evicted because you have not handled repair issues correctly. You are now. Minnesota law requires that landlord keeps their unit within reasonable repair. It's what we call livability law. It's a federal law too, a federal law called livability. Okay, which means the landlord has to keep your apartment building to some type of joyful living for you. If you have repairs that need to be made, maybe the landlord is not coming in fixing the refrigerator. The landlord is not coming in fixing a light switch. There's not enough heat in the house. The running water is running poor, it's running too soft. Whatever that repair is, okay, you pay your rent on time, because here is what you can do so that you don't get in trouble and the landlord has to make those repairs. I'm also going to tell you how the landlord may have to pay you some of your rent money back while those repairs needed to be made. It's going to be cool stuff, y'all. Okay? Minnesota law, write down MN for Minnesota law, requires Landlords to keep units in reasonable repair. Landlords keep units in reasonable repairs. Okay? When I go to the board and write, you write down everything I have on the board. It's all good. All right? Reasonable repairs. If you have a repair that has not been made and you've given the landlord written notice, oral stuff means nothing in court. You don't know how many times I've gone to court with tenants and the tenant says, well, the landlord said he was going to do this. And the judge said, did you give a notice? Well, I told the landlord. Telling the landlord means nothing. If it's not in writing, it did not happen. So you want to make sure you give a written notice. I don't care if the landlord says, well, you just told me, I'll fix it, don't worry. No, you gave a written notice with the date advising the landlord the refrigerator needs to be fixed, the heat's not working, the water's not working, there's a broken whatever it is. You make sure you give the landlord written notice that you want that repair made. None of this oral, telling them over the phone. Write a letter to that landlord, okay? If the landlord does not make the repair, then what you can do is file a complaint with inspector. I'm going to talk about that. Okay, City of St. Paul, for example. All right, if you have repairs that need to be made, you can file a report with the inspector. Usually, you can call your St. Paul Fire Department, tell them you have a repair issue. They'll give you the number to the inspector. The inspector will come out, look at your unit, and the landlord cannot tell you, you cannot let the inspector in your unit. So you make a complaint to the inspector. The landlord cannot tell you, the inspector can't come in. The city inspector comes in, looks over your apartment, notice all these repairs. The city inspector will send a notice to your landlord to make these repairs within a certain amount of time. Failure to do so will mean that your landlord could be charged with a misdemeanor offense for not making that repair. Hello. If the landlord doesn't make repairs, don't do what some people do. They don't pay the rent, because then the landlord's going to take you to court for failure to pay rent, and he or she may win. If the landlord does not make the repair, call the inspector. If the landlord doesn't make the repair after you've given notice, then what you do is contact housing court. Contact housing court and tell them that you've given your landlord written notice. You're going to keep a copy of your written notice. You're giving your landlord written notice. The landlord has not made the repairs. So you want to pay your rent into the court. So say I want to repair this month. I've given the landlord 8 days to make the repair. The landlord has not made the repair. I'm going to call housing court. I'm going to say, I want to file what is called, write it down, rent escrow. Rent escrow, write it down, okay? So I'm not going to pay my money to the landlord next month. I'm going to give my full rent, not half of it, not part of it. I'm going to pay the full rent to the court. And if you file for rent escrow, call housing court, St. Paul, Ramsey County Courthouse, whatever county you live in. Call that courthouse and say, I want rent escrow. I want housing court, because I want to file a rent escrow. The next month, you pay all of your rent to the court. And the landlord, y'all, I'm telling you, y'all get the landlord, because the landlord's going to think you didn't make the rent payment. And the landlord's going to be like, oh, I got this person now making all these complaints. They ain't paid rent. The landlord goes to file an unlawful detainer on you. Your money's sitting there in court. Y'all, this is going to get good. I'll tell you how to get some money. Okay, anyway, so you want to file what is called rent escrow. And under the TRA, so when you go to file your rent escrow, you want to mention what is called the TRA. Write it down. TRA, which is the Tenants Remedy Act. Under the TRA, Tenants Remedy Act, you can file your rent money, pay it to the court on the rent escrow if your landlord is not making repairs after you get written notice. This is going to give you a lot of power in court. Let me tell you how as we move along. Okay? Write this down. You got all this? Okay? You want to erase? So here's this is what I do a lot, y'all. Okay? I have people file their rent and the rent escrow. I have people file their rent and rent escrow, pay it to the court. Then the landlord wants to go and say, you're not paying rent. So I would tell the landlord that your rent is now in the court. So then the landlord wants to go and try to evict the tenant for not paying the rent, and it's in the court. By the time the landlord gets to court, the landlord looks like a dummy. So we got this whole thing set up within the law. Watch how it works. Okay? Now, you filed your money in the rent escrow to the court. You paid your full rent to the court because the landlord's not making repairs. You can now ask the court for what is called rent abatement. Write it down. Rent abatement. What this is say your rent is, I don't know, I'll make up a number, $900 a month. If you can find a place for that, that's pretty good. But anyway, say your rent is $900 a month. Okay? You go to court. You say, Your Honor, it's been 3 months, 2 months since these repairs have not been made. So you say, Your Honor, I want rent abatement. I want some of my rent money back that I paid to the court, because remember you put your rent in the court. And you say, Your Honor, I want my $900 that I paid to the court plus the $900 that I paid for my rent before I paid my money to the court. Your Honor, I want $700 of that $900 back. I want $700 of those other months that I had to live in these conditions. I want part of my rent money back. The judge at that point, okay, is going to order the landlord to give you part of your rent money back. So in other words, you may only have to pay $700, and then you get some of this rent money back for these other months that you had to live in those same conditions. Are y'all hearing me? So don't ever not pay your rent because of repairs. If you got repairs that have to be made, give that written notice to the landlord. Okay? Then after giving that written notice, if the landlord doesn't make those repairs, you take it to court and pay your money to the court under what is called rent escrow. And then using rent abatement, you can get some of that rent money back. And that's some cool stuff, y'all. Okay? And that's how you get repairs made rather than not paying your rent. And then the next thing you know, the landlord is taking you to court filing an unlawful detainer because you refused to pay rent because you didn't handle how to get your repairs made legally. That's some cool stuff, y'all. Get some of that money back. I did it a few times. I used to rent. Got my money. Okay? So, moving right along. So, you made requests for repairs. You've taken the landlord to court. You paid your money into the court using rent abatement. Blah, 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 blah. That's all, folks. Rent abatement. Say that 5 times. Rent abatement, rent abatement, rent abatement. Anyway. Okay. So you've done all that. And now you got this landlord that lives out in Minnetonka, lives out in Robbinsdale, up in Stillwater somewhere. Now you made this landlord get these repairs made because you called the city inspector, you filed rent abatement, you got your escrow, and now this landlord that lives way out somewhere else can't stand you because now you're an uppity person that used the law to work for you. So now this landlord has a problem with you for doing that. Okay? Write this down. 90 days. 90 days. Okay? The landlord cannot retaliate against you for rent abatement, rent escrow, sending letters for repairs. The landlord cannot retaliate against you within 90 days of standing up for your rights. Okay? The 90-day rule. The landlord cannot file, let's say you file your rent escrow, you're taking it to court, you're giving the landlord notice, you had the city inspectors come in and inspect your unit, the city inspector, the fire department is giving your landlord notice. For 90 days, the landlord cannot evict you, raise your rent, or decrease your services in any way. Now, this is where it gets tricky, the 90-day rule, okay? So you're standing up for your rights. You've called the city inspector, the fire department. They've come out, inspected your unit. They've given the landlord notice to make some repairs. Maybe you've taken your landlord to court. You paid your money to the court, rent to the court. You got the landlord in court. For 90 days, the landlord cannot evict you. The landlord cannot raise your rent. The landlord cannot decrease your services. Now, here's the tricky part. After 90 days, if the landlord evicts you, raises your rent, or decreases your services in any way, after 90 days, now the burden of proof is on you to show that the landlord did these things because you stood up for your rights to have repairs made. That's the tricky catch to that, y'all. Okay, when I erase, you do what? Catch up on your notes. Okay. You say, y'all, this is some really cool stuff because some of you are going to be moving into your apartments. Pretty soon, you're about to graduate, about to get a job, about to move into an apartment. That's how I want you to write this down. Everything I've been writing on the board, it has to be written down. That's what you are going to show me to pass this session. Okay? Because I want you to keep those notes too. Also, I'm going to be talking about job discrimination. Some of you all are going to be getting your jobs the first time. How do you deal with discrimination on your job? How do you deal with people talking about your braids? And man, y'all wouldn't believe the kind of stuff I get in my office. Okay? Me and lawyers that work on discrimination, people telling people at work, you guys got bugs in those dreadlocks? Man, y'all don't believe the kind of stuff goes on out there. So we're going to talk about that too, what your rights are when you're at work. Win some money. Bling, 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 bling. Okay, anyway. All right. Okay. Just remember, before suing your landlord, before calling the inspector, the fire department inspector out to come look at your unit, before filing rent escrow, you must first try to get your landlord to make the needed repairs and do so in writing. Okay? Now, here's some things I'm going to go over. And you don't have to write this stuff down, but I want to go over this quickly, okay? Rights of victims of violence. I want to go over this again. You don't have to write this stuff down, okay? Rights of victims of violence. To terminate lease, you must provide written notice. So say you're a victim of a domestic abuse, and now this person knows where you're at. You're afraid to stay in that unit. You can get out of the lease. You can move out of that apartment, okay? Only if you fear of imminent violence, okay? This could happen right now. This person, this stalker, this domestic abuser, this person I'm trying to get away from, he or she, they know where I'm at, okay? If you can show that that fear is imminent, it could happen right now, anytime, walking out of your apartment, going into your building, okay? If you have, and it's good, you should and you must have at least an OFP, order for protection, a no contact order that you can show to the landlord, to say, I need to get out of this lease. I need to get out of this apartment. Okay. If you do that, you must give the landlord a specific date that you plan to move. Okay. Now, remember, if you're a victim of domestic abuse, get this, because not many people know this. If you're the victim of abuse, domestic violence, to terminate that lease agreement, okay, you must provide advance written notice to the landlord. You must be able to say that tell the landlord that there's fear of imminent violence from this person right here, right now, any moment. Okay. You should also have a no contact order that's signed by the court, signed by the judge, order for protection signed by the judge. Okay. For your protection, the landlord cannot share this information with anyone. He cannot or she cannot share this information with anyone. The landlord may not enter the information into any database or give it to any person or any entity. So you share this information with the landlord, you show the information, you show the order for protection, you show the order for protection to the landlord. You show the restraining order to the landlord. The landlord cannot turn around and share that information with anyone or any entity or any screening unit, for example, or screening service. The landlord cannot share that information. Okay? If that happens, you as the tenant, you are obligated to pay that full month rent of the termination. So say you move out this month, you are still obligated to pay that full month's rent. Okay? That full month's rent. The landlord does not have to return your security deposit, and you will owe for all rent before the termination. So say you move out this month. You didn't pay last month's rent or rent before that. You still owe for those months, okay? Plus the month that you're moving out. You're not going to be able to get out of that, okay? So I want people to understand this, that when you call the police for help, the landlord cannot evict you. Go back and get that in your notes. If you have an OFP, order for protection, restraining order, and you feel this person knows where you are at, this person is going to come and get you in your house, moving out of your house, walking in your house, walking out of your house, snatch your kids. If that's imminent and you feel that fear and you have that order signed by the judge, you can terminate that lease. Now remember, when you do, tenant, your obligation, you must pay rent for the full month of that termination. So whatever month you leave, you owe for that full month, plus you also owe for any previous months that you did not pay the rent, okay? And the landlord can keep your security deposit. The landlord cannot share that information with any other person or any other entity. If you find out that the landlord did, let the proper authority know about it, okay? I want to say some final things about eviction. Now remember, this stuff you don't have to write down. What I've been saying, it's not on the board. Don't write it down. This is information I want you to know, okay? Sometimes the landlord is going to tell you you're evicted. You have to move out. I want you out by next week or else. Bump that. The landlord cannot evict you, cannot force you out of your unit without a court order. The only one that can physically remove you from your unit is the sheriff's department, law enforcement. The landlord cannot physically move you out of your apartment, cannot just come in and start throwing your stuff out of your apartment without a court order, okay? A few other things that I want to mention. Let me see here. Okay, that's pretty much it, I guess. All right, for landlord-tenant issues. All right, now remember, I want you all to empower yourselves. Write this down. MINN dot stats, STATS, Minnesota statutes 504 B, 504B point 181, your landlord tenant statutes. Read those statutes, know those statutes. There's so much more in there that I didn't go over. Read those statutes. 504 Minnesota statutes. Google it. Minnesota dot or MINN dot STATS dot 504B dot 181. That's gonna be your landlord tenant rights. Know your rights, y'all, before you start renting. My name is Lucky. I'm waiting to see your papers. All right. Let me get me some tea. Wait. I'm gonna turn this thing off first. Hold on, y'all. Dee. Hit the stop button. I think I got it. Let's see. 1, 2,